My whole training approach and philosophy centers around the idea that you probably get 90 to 95% of your progress simply from focusing on the absolute fundamentals and ensuring that you're doing those well and consistently. The other 5 to 10% is all the finer detail. That's the stuff where it's actually kind of debatable whether everyone should even bother themselves with it. If you have a real interest in bodybuilding, or you want to be a competitive bodybuilder, or you have lots of spare time on your hands and you want to watch videos about rep, tempo and protein bioavailability, then you might deem it worth it going that extra mile to make sure you are being 100% optimal. But I think for most people who just want to be in good shape and then carry on with the rest of their lives, it's best to just focus on those aspects where you get the best return on investment for the time and effort you put in. So with that in mind, I wanted to go through some of those fundamentals when it comes to building muscle. Let's do it. Number 1, maintaining a calorie surplus. First and foremost, we have to have maintaining a calorie surplus because regardless of whatever else you're doing, how hard or often you're training, you simply cannot magic something from nothing. And so you need some calories left over after all is said and done to enable the muscle building process to occur. You build muscle essentially by creating tiny tears in your muscle fibers when training, which then grow back bigger, and that bigger can be either cross-sectional or even length, but that's probably more detail than necessary. Now, of course, this repairing process is not at the front of the queue when it comes to energy utilization. That would be the basic things that keep you alive, like your heart beating, breathing, digesting food, etc. So to put it simply, if you don't have enough energy, read calories, remaining after everything else is taken care of, you just won't build muscle. Now in some cases, people with lots of excess body fat can still build muscle even if they're not eating in a calorie surplus, because some of that body fat can of course be broken down, and whilst it certainly doesn't turn into muscle, it's still just stored energy which can be used when needed for whatever bodily function requires it. However, if you've got a normal amount of body fat on you and you're not actually fat, then you're not going to build any kind of significant muscle mass without maintaining a calorie surplus. Number 2, sufficient volume, frequency, intensity. Let's just put these in lay terms for anyone not aware. We can replace volume with quantity, which is usually just measured in number of working sets. So we can talk about weekly volume per muscle group, how many working sets you perform over the course of the week for a particular muscle group, or we can talk about total workout volume, which is how many overall sets are in a workout. Frequency is just how often we're training a muscle group, and again we tend to talk about that within the context of a week. So a high frequency training split would be one that has you hitting each muscle group often, such as a full body split. Intensity is a funny one because it can kind of have two meanings. Technically, it's used to describe how heavy the weight is in relation to your 1 rep max. So a heavier weight always equates to a higher intensity, regardless of how difficult the set is overall. So on paper, a set of 5 reps with 100 kilograms would technically be a higher intensity than a set of, say, 25 reps with 95 kilograms. For us though, it's more useful to describe intensity as how heavy the weight is in relation to the number of reps performed, or in other words, how difficult the set is. Now we know what they are, we just got to figure out how much of each one we need, and that is probably different depending on your lifting experience, but let's go through them one by one. As a beginner, you should be doing a minimum of 10 sets per week per muscle group. In terms of maximum, there really isn't one, or if there is, it hasn't been found yet. Doing more always seems to result in better results, with one big caveat: adequate recovery. That's why you hear people talking not about the maximum training volume an individual can do, but the maximum recoverable training volume. That means if you train often enough and you sleep well, eat well, and you generally live a low stress lifestyle, then upwards of 20 sets per week will still be beneficial. So for most people, really just as many sets as you can fit within your training split. So if that lands around 15, then you're doing great. Frequency. There is science to show that splitting the same volume over more sessions leads to better results than putting it all in one. That's part of the reason body part splits fell out of favor. But how many sessions? Well, the answer probably isn't the same for all muscle groups, but that might be unnecessarily complicating things. If you can aim for a minimum frequency of 2 or 3 times per week, then that's great. More is probably marginally better, but I do think you'll experience diminished returns as frequency increases. Intensity. In short, if a set is just too easy and you are perfectly capable of completing it without struggling, then there is no reason for your body to adapt. It doesn't need to adapt to be able to cope with with the stimulus you're giving it. So all sets must meet a minimum level of difficulty. However, if you take them too far, you'll massively increase the recovery cost and potentially for no extra gain. So the sweet spot seems to be taking most of your sets to between 1 and 3 reps from failure. If you want to take the odd set to failure, there's no problem with that, although you probably don't have to. And occasionally some high rep sets might stop more than 3 reps from failure, but still actually be difficult enough to elicit an adaptive response. For example, if you're doing a set of 15 or 16 reps, so quite a high rep set, and you stop what is truly 4 reps from failure, you'll actually find that that's still a really difficult set. One thing to mention is that people do tend to underestimate how many reps they have left in the tank, and so if you're unsure about that, you can just do a set and make a mental note when you think you are, say, 2 reps from failure, and then carry on to actual failure and see if it is actually 2 or if you've got more left. Number 3, adequate sleep and recovery. So there's a few ways that sleep or lack thereof can affect your ability to build muscle. First, a lack of sleep will be detrimental to your workout performance. A set that stops 2 reps from failure, or what feels like it when you're tired and lethargic, is not worth the same as a set that stops 2 reps from failure when you're fresh and full of energy. So really, it's the impact that tiredness has on your perceived exertion which is the hindrance. Secondly, a lot of your actual muscle repair occurs during sleep, particularly in non-REM or what they call slow wave sleep. That's the time your body takes to shift focus away from a lot of other typical functions and direct energy towards physical repair. It makes sense that when you're walking around Tesco the following day, your body's much busier with other things and won't be able to recover the same as when you're asleep. Finally, a lack of sleep can have an impact on your hormones, 2 of which, testosterone and human growth hormone, we are particularly concerned with. You actually release a lot of your HGH when you're asleep, and there's multiple studies showing how not getting your 8 hours can have a detrimental effect on your hormone levels. Since these hormones are closely related to your ability to build and retain muscle, this will of course have a knock-on effect on your body composition. Now, I call this sleep and recovery because although you do recover a lot when asleep, probably most of your recovery is done when asleep, even if you get 8 hours a night, it doesn't mean that you can go ahead and just take no days off. I'd say for the vast majority of people, training 5 times a week is a good maximum, although you could probably push it to 6 if you don't have a very physically demanding life outside of those 6 workouts. And you also do sleep well and avoid other things that might hinder your recovery, like drugs, alcohol, general high stress. That's it, just high stress stuff. Number 4, consistency. This is a bit of a different one, but to be honest, just as important, if not more important than the others. Really, this just stems from the fact that your body takes time to adapt to new stimulus. You can do everything else that I describe in this video, but if you only do it for a day or a week, or you do it on and off, you're not going to get very far, or nowhere near as far anyway. Your body will adapt to the demand placed on it, but that is a consistent process. And so if the demand one week is your usual 5 resistance training sessions, then you'll begin adapting to that. And if the following week you do 0, then you will begin adapting to that. I'm not saying you'll immediately lose gains as soon as you stop training, but your body will tend towards the average demand placed on it. That's why a week entirely off training whilst you're on your summer holiday won't do anything if you've been consistent for the rest of the year. But taking a week off every few weeks will dramatically slow your progress. Now, it's easy just to say be consistent, but that's not particularly practical advice, is it? Because we all would if we could. So some things that might help you be consistent are as follows. Structure. If you have a set, predictable routine, whether that's how you train or the way you eat, it will make things far easier to plan for and stick to. Don't overcommit. It's better to train 3 times a week consistently than to try training every day, burn out, and then not feel like training again for a week. So start with something manageable and only increase once you've proven to yourself that you can be consistent with it. So don't start with a 5-day-a-week training split. Start with 3, and if you can be consistent with that for a couple of months on the run, then move up to 4, and so on. Tracking your progress. If you're keeping an eye on your lifts, not only will it help you with accountability, but also help you to stay motivated, seeing those little increases, because this is a slow process, and so you do have to take the small victories where you can, and maybe putting a kilogram on each side of the bar is one of those victories, right? Number 5, progressive overload. Now, to be honest, even if you have never heard of the term progressive overload and you have no idea what it even is, I mean, it'd be pretty hard to have never heard of it, but yeah, maybe you haven't, right? Even if that's the case, you're still gonna make some gains when you first start the gym because you've kind of applied it by accident anyway, right? Because going from not going to the gym to just going to the gym regardless of what you do is progressive overload, right? Benching nothing to just benching the bar, that is progressive overload. And that's probably the biggest incremental jump in progress you'll ever make. If you also keep an eye on your workout intensity, then you'll naturally increase the weights you're using over time anyway. Let's say you perform your last set of bicep curls to failure. Well, as you get stronger, you'll need to do more to hit failure, so you will automatically increase the weight or increase the number of reps you're doing. Same goes for sets that are 1 or 2 or 3 reps from failure. The weight you need to get you there needs to increase, assuming your rep ranges are set. Also, as you repeat some of your movements week in, week out, your mobility might start to increase, and therefore you might start to use a longer, wider, bigger range of motion. So in a lot of ways, you will subconsciously apply progressive overload, even if you don't realize you're doing it. And honestly, that'll get you pretty far. It's probably not until a bit further down the line, maybe 2 or 3 years into training, that you'll really need to think about progressive overload a lot more methodically. Hopefully by that time, you are following structured programs and keeping track of your lifts, so you can consciously keep trying to add weight to the bar. Those little 1.25 kilogram plates are more powerful than most realize. When you think about the process of progress and how long term that is, 1.25 kilograms isn't just adding 2.5 kilograms to the bar, right? It's adding it to the bar for every rep, which accumulates rep after rep, set after set. And if you ever bother working out the total load for an exercise, then you can see what difference those plates are making, and so do make use of them. Now, there are a lot of other factors which can help determine if you make gains, and if you do, how fast you make them, but these that I've mentioned are really the foundations upon which all else is built. Lifting can seem like a bit of a never-ending rabbit hole. There's always some new theory because, you know, some dude in Romania did a study involving 12 people, and there was a weak signal that it might be mildly beneficial to increase your rep tempo by 0.3 seconds on leg on the adductor machine. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of detail, but the truth is we're all just fitness, not you, this side, we're all just fitness YouTubers trying to make content. Do you know what I mean? We're all like vultures just circling, like picking the scraps from a carcass. Mate, go on, I might make a video about that. If you are really interested in natural bodybuilding, any bodybuilding, or you really do want to be 100% optimal and leave no gains on the table, then by all means go down these rabbit holes. You know, if you really enjoy it, you're really interested in it, then by all means, you know, read all the studies, man, read all the blog posts and get all the info you can. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's great if that's how you want to spend your time, but I think most people just want to go to the gym, lift, get in pretty good shape, and then just carry on with the rest of their lives. And most people will be able to do that simply by sticking to the basics and doing them long term. See you later.
Joey Lenny is my hero.